Good afternoon, everyone. I believe it is, the clock has struck noon. We'll go ahead and get started. I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. And Mr. Coley, can you call the rolls, please?
Commissioner Caballero. Commissioner Feinbaum.
Present.
Commissioner Gibson.
Present.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Here.
Commissioner Pickett.
Present.
Commissioner Simpson Brown is here, and do I understand Commissioner Herbert will be absent today?
Correct.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Coley. I believe we all had a chance to review the April minutes. May I have motion for approval?
Motion to approve.
And second?
Second.
At this time, I'd like to recognize Gabe. We have several official actions to take up today, so I'll turn it over to you. I'm sorry, we need to vote. I'm rushing.
Commissioner Caballero.
Aye.
Commissioner Feinbaum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson. Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Pickett. Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye,
Minutes are approved.
thank you. Now I recognize Gabe. I'm ready to get it. Let's get it going.
Commissioners, I'd like to recognize Anna Haggerty. She is an analyst in our Rates and Analytical Services Department to go over 3 of these resolutions that related to supply costs from our supplier TVA, one involving the Power Supply Flexibility Program, one to establish our new rate for our new EV charging stations that will be operational at the end of the summer, and our participation in a new program TVA's got called Power Flex. So Anna, please, thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I am here today to discuss a few rate actions with you regarding the purchase power adjustment, the EVC pump rate, and the Power Flex program. So we'll first start off with the purchase power adjustment. So as you recall, last September, the board authorized the participation in the TVA's expanded flexibility program. The expanded flexibility program allows distributors to generate a portion of its own power. And these renewable energy projects will generate savings by reducing our payments to TVA. And as Mark will discuss later, and he's discussed previously, these savings are included in our inflation response plan and our electric division's long-range plan. So a little bit about the purchase power adjustment. It is a cost recovery mechanism, and any changes in our purchase power cost flow through the PPA and into our rates. So this amendment to the PPA is going to retain the savings from our expanded flexibility and not have it flow through the rates. So KUB can fund these renewable energy projects. So is there any questions on the PPA before I move on?
3 questions. So currently, isn't that flow through kind of a incentive for people to adopt more renewable energy? How would this affect how people would want to?
So this is different than, this is new projects that we will have, the renewable energy projects that TVA is allowing through this program. So if we did not have the savings flow through, then it would flow through our rates and we would not be able to fund these projects. It would be.
So it's not like we're taking anything away from anyone because
No,
it's
we are
something that
not.
would
We're
move forward.
not. Yeah. These will be reducing our payments to TVA, so it is an incentive for us as well too, and our customers. So these will be reducing their purchase power as well, since we're generating it on our own.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry. This was a small part of our inflation response plan as far as funding for the electric. We were projecting savings and power costs of about $14 million through 2030, and that went in to help fund some of the inflationary pressures in Century 2 expansion for the electric system.
Anything else? Okay, so I will move on to the electric vehicle charging pump rate, or EVCP as we like to call it. KUB is partnering with TVA in the city of Knoxville to build 2 electric vehicle charging stations that will be open later this summer. So in this, we have developed a driver rate using station cost and projected usage. And our rate that we have calculated is comparable and competitive with the other electric vehicle stations in the area and in the valley. And what the customers will pay at the pump, which is really just the charger, will be 40 cents per kWh. Is there any questions on EVC pump rate?
How does that 40 cents compare to if you have a home charger, the rate you're paying at your part of your utility bill?
So it's equivalent to about $3 at the gas pump, comparable to the, since the ones at home are not fast chargers, this is a little bit different. So it would be comparable to like our KWH rate for the residential customers, which can be from 10 to like 12 cents. So it would be more expensive, but they are getting the charge faster. Yeah, yeah. Anything else? Okay. So I'll move on to the last thing, which is TVA's PowerFlex program. So TVA has developed a new demand response program similar to our IP5 and IP30 programs that our customers currently are participating in. And this provides customer incentives if customers curtail their load based on TVA notification. And this helps TVA manage their system peaks. This program will be available June 1st and for customers with contracts 1 megawatt or greater. And TVA has offered multiple contracts options for the customers to choose from, the amount of curtailment, notifications, and everything. Oh, yeah, I went ahead, sorry. And TVA is offering extra customer incentives for early commitment to this program, and it requires a new rate schedule. Is there any questions on anything that I've presented on? So in front of you is Resolution 1487, which amends the PPA to set aside the savings from the Expanded Flexibility Program. Mr. Coley.
I think we'll need a motion for a call roll.
That is true. I'd like a motion and a second for Resolution 1487 on first reading.
So moved. Second.
Do we have any visitors who want to speak to this particular resolution? Mr. Colley, will you call the roll?
Yes, Commissioner Caballero,
Aye.
Commissioner Feinbaum,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibson, Commissioner Hamilton,
Aye.
Commissioner Pickett, Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Resolution 1487 on the purchase power adjustment passes on first reading.
That's 2 readings.
Okay, the next resolution is Resolution 1488, which establishes the electric vehicle charging pump rate schedule for the electric division.
Motion to approve?
Do we have any visitors who want to speak to this motion, to this resolution? I'm sorry. Thank you. Mr. Colley, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Commissioner Caballero.
Aye.
Commissioner Feinbaum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson. Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Pickett.
Aye.
Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Resolution 1488 on the EVCP rate passes on first reading.
And then lastly is Resolution 1489, which establishes our participation in TVA's PowerFlex program and establishes our PowerFlex rate schedule for the electric division.
We need a motion and a second for this particular motion on first reading.
Motion to approve?
Second?
Do we have any visitors for this particular resolution? Mr. Colley, please call the roll.
Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Pickett.
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson. Commissioner Feinbaum.
Aye.
Commissioner Caballero.
Aye.
Resolution 1489 passes on first reading.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Commissioners, as you know, we've been talking for quite some time, actually for the last year, about our upcoming budget, long-range plan, rate considerations, and given the inflationary pressures we've been seeing, and also about this next year's budget. So I've asked Mark Walker, Senior Vice President, Chief Financial Officer, to review the amendment of the current budget, then present a proposed budget for next year with funding recommendations, And then he'll present all these actions in 6 resolutions for your consideration. So, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Gabe. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Today I do have, my presentation will cover 6 official action items, so 6 resolutions that will be voted on at the end. Gabe provided a bit of a summary of those, so we'll go ahead and get started. The first item that we want to talk about is amending the current fiscal year budget appropriations. So this time last year, in May of '23, the board adopted budget appropriations for all 5 utility divisions, including the wastewater division, and that amount was set at $132.4 million. Our current forecast for cash expenditures for wastewater for this fiscal year is almost $3 million higher than that amount. And so what is driving that increase? It is really timing issues on both sides. One is when we set the budget back in May of '24, we were working or beginning to work on a project on Nayland Drive, a wastewater trunk line project. Some of those payments that we thought would occur in FY '23 moved into FY '24. So there's a timing issue there. And then we had an operating expense that we had in our plan for FY '25 that got accelerated to this year, to this spring. So no additional cost to the long-range plan of the wastewater division. These are just timing issues, one coming from '23, one coming from '25. And so we are requesting the board adopt a resolution adding $3 million in budget appropriations for the current fiscal year for the wastewater division for us to be able to cover all those expenditures as required by the city charter, which would increase the wastewater budget to $135.4 million. We did talk about this briefly at the April financial workshop. We did have a more thorough discussion with the board's Audit and Finance Committee at their meeting earlier this month. Any questions on that one? Okay. So next series of slides will be dealing with the FY '25 budget appropriations. And in total, as we discussed in April, nothing's really changed. It's still $1.2 billion for all 5 divisions combined. That is an increase of $66 million over our current year forecast for cash expenditures. And that increase is driven by wholesale energy being up about $13 million, and that's really due to more electric and gas customers than we had for FY '24. O&M is up about $20 million over the current year forecast. That is labor-related expenses, higher staffing level in FY '25, wage growth, and then general inflationary pressures driving that increase. And then capital, really as planned, was just going to be higher in FY '25, and that's about another $20 million. So those are the drivers for the increase. As far as the capital budget itself, it's obviously a big part of the $1.2 billion, almost $300 million. It includes $148 million for the continuation of our Century 2 infrastructure programs for electric, gas, water, and wastewater. It also includes $90 million for the continued deployment of the fiber system, fiber services to the home as well. And then to help fund that capital budget, we are requesting authority to issue $111 million in new bonds. We'll talk about that in more detail a little bit later, but that's $91 million in new bonds for electric and $20 million in new bonds for water. And just to highlight some of the key programs and projects, obviously wholesale energy is a big part of the budget, almost 45%, but some of the other key programs and projects, we really already talked about the fiber, the $90 million. A little bit more detail on that. That covers 1,200 miles of new fiber construction, extending fiber services to the home for about 9,250 new customers is what we're projecting to add. And we've also talked about FLISR devices for the electric system, which help manage outages and reduce outage time. So that's also included in that budget, about 144 new FLISR devices for FY '25 to be installed. The MBW water filter project, the biggest dollar project we'll have in KUB's history to date. It's $67 million total. $30 million of that is budgeted for FY '25. It's due to be completed in the first half of the following fiscal year. We'll have about $5 million left to pay once we get past June 30 of '25. So that's another big project. Vegetation management, obviously an important part of maintaining reliability for our electric system. $16 million is included in the budget. That'll provide for the trimming of about 1,000 miles around our 69 kV lines and 13 kV lines. And then also there's $2 million built into the $16 million for hazardous tree removal. And then the last item I'll note on there is the electric transmission line upgrades. We're part of a long-term program to rebuild our 69 kV electric transmission system. We have about 10 miles of rebuild scheduled for next fiscal year. Price tag's $13 million for that. So just to give you a little bit of flavor of what are some of the key items in that $1.2 billion above and beyond wholesale energy.
Can you
Yes.
remind me, I remember we had a conversation, IT enterprise system. What exactly does that encompass when we talk about that in the budget? I know there was a big system we wanted to change, but I can't remember.
We have a new CIS system that will be starting to work on in FY '25. So that's probably a portion of that, but it's going to be probably, Jamie, I don't know, refer maybe $15 to $20 million project when it's all said and done. But so this is just the beginning stages of that, and it'll carry over for several more fiscal years beyond FY '25. It's not just for fiber, no, it is for all.
Our current CIS is literally 25 years old. And so the thought is that we replace the one that we've had that long covering the other 4 utilities, and then also potentially wrapping up fiber inside of it as well too. Customer Information System.
Sorry.
Like a CRM, exactly, yeah. It's so old it got a new name over these years. That's right.
One other thing to mention on here on the Walker Springs Pump Station, we did get a grant to fund about 80% of that. So that's good. Looking just in summary at the proposed budget by division, because as you know, each division has its own budget appropriations, and then you see the major cost components there. So here I just want to state what it is by division. Electric is $793 million of the $1.2 billion. Gas is $135 million. Water is $120. Wastewater is $127, and fiber is $28 million. And then you can see how the various cost components are allocated across the divisions. So my next series of slides, I'll talk about those cost components and some of the key components of them. The loan to fiber from the electric division, I just want to mention that because I probably won't touch upon that again. That is $11 million of the FY '25 budget, and that is part of a series of loans electric has made and is going to continue to make to fiber of $55 million total. So $11 million in FY '25 of that. And then, of course, fiber pays that back over time. So the biggest component, single component, is wholesale energy. This is always the case. It's about 43% of our total proposed budget at $516 million. And this covers what we pay TVA for the purchase of electric power, which is going to be, we're estimating our budgeting $455 million in total for FY '25. And that's about 6 billion kilowatt hours of electric power for our 200,000 plus electric system customers. On the gas side, $59 million is budgeted for the purchase of gas, for the transportation of gas, storage. We have to pay the pipelines to reserve capacity to move the gas as well. All that comes together for $59 million in total. And as you know, natural gas commodity prices have dropped significantly in recent months, and so we hope to do a little bit better than that on the budget, and if we do, that's just savings that flows through to our customers through lower commodity prices and that. And then there's a very small piece of this that is fiber cost of goods sold, and that is sort of the equivalent, I know it's not energy, but of what it is on for electric and gas on the wholesale side. This is really wholesale for phone, wholesale for video services, and it's $2 million of that budget. So we just put it in there as opposed to creating a separate category. O&M, total budget $234 million. Almost half of that is for labor-related expenses, which is really consistent with in past years. We're going to have our full-time staffing plan calls for over 1,300 employees in FY25. So a portion of that payroll is O&M, a portion is capital. The O&M portion is 81 million. If you want to look at the whole picture, it's like 116 million total. 35 million is embedded in the capital budget. So that's a big part of it. Then we have medical coverage for our employees. That's $14 million in the budget. Then we have post-employment benefits. So we make contributions to our pension and OPEB trust funds that are required per actuarial calculations. That's about $4 million in the budget. Then 401k matching for our employees is about $5 million in the budget. And just a few other items to touch upon here on materials and other costs. Utilities, $12 million of our budget. We're sort of paying ourselves in some regard there for that. Different divisions are. The biggest part of that is for our water and wastewater treatment plants. They use a fair amount of electric power, so half of that $12 million is for water and wastewater treatment. And then stock materials, $10 million. That's items we keep in stock to maintain our utility systems, like valves and things such as that on that. And then chemicals is $5 million, and that's to treat water and wastewater. There's $7.2 million in fiber fees. Again, as you know, fiber does pay the electric division annually based upon certain criteria and access and utilization fees for utilizing the assets of the electric system to provide services. That's $7.2 million in the budget for O&M. On capital, total budget of $297 million. Really, I'll try and be brief on this. We've already talked about some of the key capital projects. 89% of the $297 million, which is $263 million, is directly related to utility system infrastructure. A lot of that is Century 2. You have the $90 million for the fiber as well as part of that. And then you have other plant-related work that falls into that. The other 11% or $34 million is really for work on facilities, various campuses across that we have across our service territory. It's also for purchasing vehicles, upgrading equipment for our overhead and underground construction departments. It also has IT work in there as well, capital work. So in total, $34 million for that. All comes together for the $297 million. Debt. So our debt budget reflects principal and interest payments we make on our outstanding bonds. So in total, that budget is $98 million for FY25. And you can see the breakdown between principal and interest. Of that $98 million, $4 million of that is fiber paying electric back in principal and interest for interdivisional loans that have been made to date. So that's a small portion of that. We currently have $1.15 billion in outstanding bonds. Those are the long-term revenue-backed bonds. We are proposing to add $111 million in new debt for FY25. We're going to pay down on the debt. You subtract the $2 million for fiber, that $48 million. So we're going to have a net increase of about $63 million in outstanding long-term debt by the end of fiscal year 25. And so we'll be over $1.2 billion in outstanding bonds. All of this is consistent, as you may recall, in conversations we had surrounding the IRP and debt funding and what would be happening in FY25. So no new surprises or new information there. And then in lieu of tax payments and our federal payroll taxes comprise $46 million of the proposed budget. Most of that is in lieu of tax payments. As you know, by state law and city charter, we're required to make in lieu of tax payments to the taxing jurisdictions in which our utility systems are located. The pilot's portion of this is $38 million, and of that $38 million, we're budgeted $26 million to be paid to the city of Knoxville, $11 million to Knox County, $1 million to all the other taxing jurisdictions combined. And then this budget component rounds out with $8 million in federal payroll taxes that we remit to the government on behalf of our employees. Any questions on that? You saw this slide at the April workshop, and the key part of it is how are we paying for the $1.2 billion? And it's the pie chart on the right-hand side of the slide that reflects that. So you got a little over 1.2 billion. We are projecting system revenues will generate 1.05 billion of that, so $1,050,000,000. So that will come from system revenues generated during the course of the year. That leaves about 153 million. Where is that coming from? Bond proceeds in electric and water will fund 111 million of that. And then you have $20 million in grants for water and for electric that will help fund it. And then we have about $11 million in general fund cash on hand, and then 11 million for the electric loan to the fiber division, because that's funding for it, rounds out the $1.2 billion. The rate increases that you'll consider later today have a very small amount of those system revenues, because most of those are going to be prospective to FY25 when they go into effect. So we can talk about debt. First of all, we have two debt funding recommendations today. One you're familiar with because we do it every year, and that's issuance of long-term revenue bonds. So 111 million total, 91 million electric, 20 million water. These are bonds that will mature over a period of 30 years, as has really been our practice over that. They'll have a level payback structure, just like a home mortgage, same amount each year for the most part. But the principal and interest mix changes year to year on that. Importantly, we've budgeted an interest rate, or an average interest rate, of 4.5% for these bonds. We do that in conjunction with our financial advisor and what we believe is a reasonable rate based upon current market conditions. So we hope to do better than that, but that's what underlies the budget for that. And our bond issues always have a call provision in them to allow for early redemption. Basically, these series of bonds will have a 9-year call, meaning by 2033 we can call the bonds if we so choose. And that typically occurs for refinancing opportunities on that. And then they do have to be approved by City Council. So part of the resolution you'll vote on at the end, not only is the board approving all of the bonds, but it's requesting City Council approval for that. And we do anticipate going to Council next month, sometime probably mid-June, to get their approval, and then we'll go down through the process talking to rating agencies and all of that. And probably the sale will occur in, I think, early August, and we'll get the funds in later that month, before September 1st. That's the plan. So our debt management policy does stipulate that we need to review the projected maturity schedule for the bonds. And so that's what these next two charts do provide for. So for electric, at the 4.5% budgeted interest rate, that translates to interest cost of $87 million over the life of the bonds. And you can see on the projected maturity schedule here, except for the first year, which is always a little bit less because of timing. It's about a little under $6 million per year is your annual debt service payment, and you can see how the mix of principal and interest changes over time. So 30-year, they will fully mature unless we refinance them or defease them prior to that. They would reach full maturity in July of 2054, long time from now. By the end of next fiscal year, the electric division will have total debt service outstanding of $783 million. $483 million in principal bond values themselves, $300 million in interest payments at that time. And once we get beyond FY25 as part of our long-term funding plan, we're anticipating getting up close to $550 million in electric here in the next few years. Then it will trend down. And remember, our goal by FY30 was to be no more than $500 million outstanding. So this is just part of the process, again, in line with what we talked about in the IRP. And then we always look at, over the next 10 years, how much of that is going to be paid down. We do have a criteria in our debt management policy that says so much principal needs to be repaid in the next 10 years. this does comply with that. But of the 783, almost 340 million is paid in the next 10 years, including $165 million in the principal, which is, I think, about 34% of the 483 million. So I know, a lot of numbers. Anything? On the water side, $20 million in new bonds, projected interest cost a little over $18.5 million on that. The annual debt service is about $1.3 million once you get beyond the first year. We'll end next fiscal year with $302 million in total debt service outstanding, $209 million in principal, $93 million in interest. And then you can see what would be repaid over the next 10 years on that, and that is also in compliance with our debt management policy. Okay. So, next, this is something we probably haven't talked about in quite a while. I know Commissioner Hamilton will recall this, but when you look at the cash flows of the gas division, one of the, unlike the other systems where you have really uniformity almost to some degree, even in purchase gas cost across the fiscal year, month to month, your sales revenue is really heavy in the winter heating season on that. So that can lead to potential cash flow issues. And back in the 1990s, the state legislature adopted a statute that allows for municipal gas systems to issue short-term notes for the purpose of funding purchase gas costs to address this seasonality in cash flow. So you don't have to go to the bond market, do any type of long-term borrowing for this. You can do short-term notes. And probably beginning in the mid-90s and all the way up to 2015-16, we did this it was just part of our financing package each year. And then in the last 4 or 5 years, we really haven't had the need to have a line of credit, so we haven't even brought it to the board for your approval. But based upon our cash flow projections this year, it is going to be needed on that. So it is a revenue anticipation note. It cannot, by poor state law, it can't have a maturity greater than 1 year. Our plan is always to pay it back before the end of the fiscal year. It just gets you over a period of months where you've run out of cash, basically, without it. So it's just a short-term borrowing feature. It does have to be approved by the comptroller. So tomorrow, if you adopt this resolution today, we have the whole package ready to go that we'll submit to the state. And it's typically just a formality, especially given our credit rating, that they will approve that. But I did want to share with you what our projected cash flows are for the gas division. And if you look at the yellow line, disregard the red line for a moment, the yellow line is our month-end general fund balance projections for gas for next fiscal year. So you can see once we get past September, you get into October, November, December, we've run out of cash. So this whole thing here is just that. We wouldn't be able to cover our projected expenditures on that. So we need another source of funding to be able to do that, hence the line of credit. And that's what the red line shows. And this assumes that in October we would draw down $15 million of the $20 million note. That would probably be in a different pattern when it's actually said and done. If this was to materialize, we wouldn't necessarily draw it all because you want to minimize your interest cost as a part of this. But basically the point is, once you get through the winter heating season, the revenues start to come in, then we pay it. When those lines intersect there, that's when you're repaying it. So we'd probably only have a balance outstanding for no more than 5 months on that. So we will be bidding this out. Typically it's local banks that will submit bids on this, and then we'll evaluate those, award it. We will come back to the board and let you know the results of that, much like we do on the bonds. That's another requirement of the debt management policy to do that. But we've already, put some feelers out with local banks, so I don't think it's not going to be an issue. There's not a lack of liquidity in the marketplace. It's going to say, well, we don't have the capital for that. They do. So anyway, this is something that most of you probably haven't seen, even though we used to, I think we did it 20 years in a row at one point in time. So, any questions on that? Okay. And then looking at the estimated fees for the bonds and line of credit combined, and you can see a familiar list of characters there as far as the professional firms that we use. It's $398,000 total. $390,000 of that is associated with $111 million in bonds. We're estimating about $8,000 in issuance costs for the line of credit on that, because there's not much that work associated with that. But at $390,000 for $111 million in bonds, that's 35 basis points on the par value of the bonds. So that's very competitive, and that's a pretty good deal on that. So just wanted to disclose this to you as well. So the rate funding recommendations, and this truly is something that we have been talking about for quite a while. We initially came to the board back in November of 2023 with our inflation response plan workshop, and looked at options, funding recommendations, were actually options, and those options all included basically 3 years of rate increases for all systems. And then we came back in January, based on feedback we received from the board, presented our preliminary funding recommendations, which included a series of 3 annual rate increases for each division. We took it to the Community Advisory Panel in February, talked to them about it, they got their support. Then we came back in last month, the financial workshop, and gave our final recommendation on that, which is a series of 3 annual rate increases for electric, gas, water, and wastewater. Just a couple of points on that. For residential, the increases are applied solely to the usage or commodity rates. No change in residential basic service charges. And for our business customers, their monthly bill impacts will simply vary, depending upon what rate classification they're in, depending upon their monthly usage on that. And the next slide you're probably quite familiar with. We have shown this several times to the board, but here are, I guess, the final recommendations for your consideration today. And from a percentage basis, for electric, we have a 4% increase that would go into effect in April of 25, a 3% April of 26, a 2% April of 27. For gas, you see 3% rate increases. The first of those would go into effect this October, October of 24, the next October of 25, then October of 26. For water, 6% increases. Effective dates, July of 25, so over a year from now, July of 26, July of 27, and the same for wastewater, 2%, but the same effective dates as the water rate increases, July 25, July 26, July 27. So those are their system percentages. The bottom part of the table looks at the monthly bill impacts for the average residential customer, and these are unchanged, again, from really, well, there's been a slight change. Anna pointed out to me an error I made in what I showed you in April of a nickel. But anyway, so it has changed slightly. And you can see what those monthly bill impacts are. So if you're looking at an average residential electric customer, by the time all 3 of those go into effect, you've added about $11.50 to the average customer's monthly bill. For gas, it's about $5.85. Water, it's $6.45. Thank you, Gabe. And for wastewater, it's $4.50. So, again, we talked about this several times. And then last and probably least is the commitment appropriations for FY25. And our city charter, our portion of the charter states that not only can you need an appropriation to spend money out the door within a 12-month period, but you also, if you're going to commit KUB to cash expenditures beyond that 12-month period, you have to have an appropriation to cover that, and thus they're titled commitment appropriations. So our projected amounts for those, you can see in total it's about $146 million. Electric, $61 million. Gas is about $14 million. water's 27.5, wastewater's 38.5, and fiber's a little less than 5 million. That, and then the final slide before we get to the resolutions is just a listing of the types of projects, the type of work that support the commitment appropriations, and all of this was in your packets that you received prior to this meeting. So that's all the slides I really have to talk from before we get to the voting on the resolutions. Are there any questions, any comments? I know we've been down this road several times before for the most part on most of these items, but.
I think the one thing we've talked about in the past, and I don't remember if I saw it reflected here, was what supports are we going to have? Is there anything built in for low-income folks that are going to be impacted with rates and just inflation in general? It's not only ours as KUB, but what do we have built in the budget?
Well, as far as we have our typical programs, longstanding programs in place, such as Project Help, and, Tiffany, you might be able to speak more detail to that, but.
Yeah, Mark is correct. In years past, we did have funding through credits that we could help with assistance. We don't have those credits to apply at this point. So our supports will be primarily that Project Help relationship that comes from us and our partner that manages that. We will also continue to direct customers to other assistance programs in the community. So the work that our customer counselors do will continue. They will understand that that will be even more critical because of the rate adjustments that are being made at this point. So we will continue to work very closely with customers that are experiencing issues, but we won't have a program like we've had in the past to help with direct assistance at this point.
So have we spent down all the money that we had then?
Yes.
In the?
Yeah, both of those programs have completed, and we spent about $13 million to assist customers with
During
both of those
this
programs.
pandemic funds, right? And as a reminder for me, what does it cost us to run the Project Help? Or what's in the budget for that?
It doesn't cost us anything at all. So that project is funded directly from community donations. And KUB does not take any administrative costs from those funds. So 100% of those dollars go directly to customer assistance. CAC is our partner that helps administer applications and income requirements. They also don't take a portion of those funds. So it's 100% community donations going directly to assistance. We do serve on the Project Help Board. It is managed by a community board. And so we often talk about what's happening from a rate perspective as well as just bills and consumption. And so that board does often change income requirements and or funding amounts per benefit for each of those customers that go through the program to assist. So they have recently upped the amount that can be contributed to an individual custer, knowing that this is coming. So we have been
From
having
what to
those
what?
conversations. So in the past, pre-pandemic, the maximum was $400. During the pandemic, it went up to $1,000, and it's recently gone to $1,500. So we're trying to adjust as needed to support community members that may be challenged with financial difficulties.
Thank you.
And there are other federal funding programs, LIHEAP, and there's a wastewater version of that as well that goes through CAC that can help customers with their bills.
One last follow-up question to complete my picture of this. What happens to the money that clients pay, like when they round up, when we pay our bills? Where does that go?
Rounded up goes to home weatherization. So those dollars go to home upgrades. They are not for emergency bill assistance. They're really trying to attack the larger issue to reduce the bill overall.
Do you have off
What
the
those
top of your head
dollars
how
go
much
to.
we raise in roundup?
About $600,000 a year from customer donations.
right.
From customer
Thank you.
donations.
But we have a total financial commitment to weatherization of $2 million per year. And then we're also looking for grants. I know Erin and her team, we're looking for alternative sources of that. But, the statistics show that for a home that's weatherized, it reduces their energy burden by about 15% on average, so. So we're ready to vote.
Let's go.
So first item up is to amend the current fiscal year budget for the wastewater division, Resolution 1490.
For this resolution, we request a motion and a second on first and final reading.
Motion to approve?
We have any visitors who want to speak to this resolution? Mr. Coley, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Caballero.
Aye.
Commissioner Feinbaum.
Yes.
Commissioner Gibson. Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Pickett. Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Resolution 1490 has passed.
Okay, 1491 is the approval of the revenue bonds and requesting city council authorization of the 91 million in electric bonds and 20 million in water bonds.
We need a motion and a second for this resolution on first and final reading.
Move to approve.
Mr. Coley, do we have any visitors? Mr. Coley, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Caballero.
Aye.
Commissioner Feinbaum.
Yes.
Commissioner Gibson. Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Pickett. Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Resolution 1491 has passed.
And 1492 is the authorization to issue up to $20 million in revenue anticipation notes.
For 1492, we need a motion and a second on first and final reading. Any visitors for this resolution? Seeing none. Mr. Coley, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Pickett. Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson. Commissioner Feinbaum.
Aye.
Commissioner Caballero.
Aye.
Resolution 1492 has passed.
And 1493 replaces the existing rate schedules of the electric, gas, water, and wastewater divisions to provide for the series of 3 annual rate increases.
For Resolution 1493, we would need a motion and a second on first and final reading.
Move to approve.
Any visitors? Snuck in. Mr. Coley, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Commissioner Caballero.
Aye.
Commissioner Feinbaum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson. Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Pickett. Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Resolution 1493 is passed on first reading.
Yes, there will be a second reading on this resolution at the June board meeting.
My apologies. First reading.
And Resolution 1494 is the $1.2 billion budget.
Request a motion and second for Resolution 1494 on first and final reading.
Second.
Do we have any visitors to want to speak on this resolution? Mr. Coley, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Pickett. Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson. Commissioner Feinbaum.
Aye.
Commissioner Caballero.
Aye.
Resolution 1494 has passed.
And the last resolution is 1495, and that is the commitment appropriations for the 5 utility divisions.
Request a motion and second for the Resolution 1494 on first and final reading. 1495, my apologies.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any visitors? Nope. Mr. Coley, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Caballero. Mr. Feinbaum.
Aye.
Mr. Gibson. Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Pickett. Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Resolution 1495 has passed.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. A lot of votes there.
Thank you for your presentations. I'd like to recognize Gabe again for his president's report.
Yeah, and I will actually, I wanted to pass it on to our Commissioner Hamilton, who's Chair of our Audit and Finance Committee, to actually introduce this report. So Kathy?
Thank you, Gabe. As Chair of Audit and Finance Committee, I want to report that we adopted, the committee adopted fiscal year 2025 financial and organizational metrics at our meeting that was held on May 2nd. And I'm going to turn it over to Chris Hood, Vice President of Finance, to share an overview of those metrics with the board. Chris?
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton, and good afternoon. As stated, the board's Audit and Finance Committee did meet on May 2nd to review the proposed organizational financial metrics. The good news is the metrics were approved. The vote was held here, so no votes required from this board. So I'll go over each of the metrics individually with you, starting out with the financial metrics. And these should look pretty familiar. These are the same metrics that we have in place for FY24. Obviously, these will be updated with the new budget amounts that Mark just presented. First metric is O&M for each of our 5 operating divisions that we would come in at or below budget for operations and maintenance expenses. Next up, cash generated from operations. Here we desire to come in at or above budget as far as cash generated. And just a reminder of what cash generated from operations is. That's our operating receipts from each of the divisions. We adjust that for any grants or reimbursements that we might have received, take out our purchased energy costs, O&M, and then our debt service and taxes. So that gives us our cash generated from operations. And in this instance, we want to obviously come in at budget or greater. Next up is our debt service coverage. Obviously, this is very important to the rating agencies. We have worked with the rating agencies to establish numbers that are actually higher than what our debt management policy requires. Debt management policy requires that we would be able to cover our outstanding debt at least 1.2 times. And what that means is, by calculation, I'm going to back up and go to the cash generated number there. If you take that number and you add back in your debt service and your payment of low taxes, that gives you your numerator, divide that by your maximum outstanding debt. So that's just basically the number of times we can cover that maximum debt. With the rating agencies, and our goals for this year would be that we'd be able to cover both electric and gas 3 times. Our water division, that we'd have 2 times coverage, and then wastewater 1.75 times coverage. And with that, we would be satisfying the requirements that we've kind of aligned with the rating agencies on. So that's the 3 financial metrics that we're striving to achieve this year. And I'll move on to the
Chris?
organizational metrics.
Sorry,
Yes.
can I just ask a question there? In O&M, I feel like, and tell me if there's a different way of seeing this, but for me, if we aren't spending, like at this point in our economy, that's not because we were frugal that we spent less. It would be because we didn't finish a project, or we weren't even able to do a project because maybe it went out of range so far in cost. So in terms of financial metrics, on budget, great. But less than at this point would tell me that we weren't able to do something that we were planning. So I guess there's a bit of it.
So let's look at both sides of the house there. On our capital budgets, we have run into exactly what you're talking about, and the fact that we truly have had to manage cost, and sometimes that means foregoing a project just because, you know, the cost have risen to the point to where we can't fit all the projects into that budget year. Generally on our O&M, you know, those things don't have quite as much flexibility. So we have run into this though. This year, inflation has definitely impacted our O&M budgets. Now, going into next year, you know, we've adjusted with the IRP to hopefully where if inflation holds about where we think, we should be within those O&M targets. But, you know, inflation continues to be sticky, so point well made is fact, you know, this O&M target is something we will have to actively manage.
Yeah, and another good example, the August storm last year, that put us basically in the hole for the electric division this whole year. I mean, you had a major multi-day event that was, you know, we'll get reimbursed in a few years, but it's an O&M, it just blows your budget up to some degree. You have to do it. And so we just know that going into it. So.
Yeah, perfect point by Gabe there. August storm, $4.5 million. You know, those type of hurdles, when you start stacking those up, these metrics become challenging, so. Yeah. Okay, next up, organizational metrics. These should look very, very familiar. Each of those are represented there are a metric this year. One thing that we really tried to do this year when setting our organizational metrics was make sure that each of these are quantitative. Last year, we had some qualitative metrics. It's a little bit harder to measure those, so this year, everything we're going to be looking at is from a quantitative perspective. Start out the same way that our crews start every day, and that's with safety. Obviously, this is of paramount importance to KUB. Goal this year, just as it was last year, was to have 0 preventable serious injuries for the year. What is a serious preventable injury? That's an instance in which we had a lost time accident, safety protocols were not followed, and the results were a significant injury to an employee. That may be something similar to a severe laceration, electrocution, amputation. I mean, these are serious injuries, but at the end of the day, we didn't follow safety protocols. So obviously, we want all of our employees to go home exactly as they came to work every day. So 0 would be the metric for the upcoming year. All right, next up, electric reliability. This is really our scorecard. If you think about it, John talked about last month in the budget workshop, all the things we're doing on our electric system, whether it be vegetation management, the Century 2 work, installation of new technologies such as Flisser. All those things come into play in making sure that our systems are reliable for our customers. So this year we see that we continue to press on this metric. We're trying to get these numbers down as much as possible. Target goal for average hours without power for a typical customer would be 1.95, and then the average instances would be 1.4. You can see our performance so far year to date. These numbers are a little misleading because we've had, you all have experienced the same thing I've experienced the last couple of weeks, a little bit of noise these last couple of weeks with the weather. That is the thing we cannot control. We can respond quickly, but we cannot control the weather. So this year, according to our electric engineering manager, the average occurrence without power, we may be close on that one. So. All right, next up, Century 2 replacements. Mark talked about Century 2 programs in the budget. Both Kurt Stafford and John Gresham talked about all the projects that we've got within our Century 2 replacement programs last month. These are a couple of those. These are the ones we're going to highlight. Obviously, Century 2 encompasses more items. First up, underground cable replacement. John spoke about the XLP cable. That's that direct buried cable that we discussed last month. We've got to get that out of the ground and replace it with cable and conduit. There's about 5 miles of that we're going to be striving to achieve this year. Next up, transmission lines. There's 9.5 miles of those. The areas that we focus on, I guess this year would be in Mascot. There's some Union County, I guess, replacements we need to make. Then Ball Camp area, and also in Gibbs. So a lot of work there to be done on our transmission system to upgrade cable there. Next up, moving over to gas. This is a low-pressure steel main. John highlighted projects last month in both Broadacre subdivision in Powell, as well as Village Green, in which we're going to be replacing that with new PVC pipe. Next up, switching over to water wastewater. A couple of big projects here. Obviously 12 miles to replace on the water system. It is by far not the largest project, but it is probably the most magnitude, and that is on Cumberland Avenue, and that will become available to, I guess, start construction very soon after school ends. So we want to do that in the summer while students are not there. Next up, on the wastewater system, almost 7.5 miles of replacement on wastewater. I guess big project there would be in the Fort Sanders area, 2.5 miles in Fort Sanders. We want to get ahead of the city's paving schedule. So as we finish that work up, city will be coming home right back behind us, repaving those streets. So Century 2, obviously a lot of work to be done here, but this is what keeps our system renewed. Okay. Next up, call center performance. This is probably the item that the committee talked about the most. This is an area where really 2 years ago, we were not meeting the targets we wanted for our customers, and we had work to do here. So we brought this to the committee, and the committee set a 3-year goal. You can see here at the time in 2023, we set a metric of 60% of calls would be answered within 90 seconds or less. Now, obviously, this is not everything as far as what our customer needs are. There's a quality perspective there, too. But if we don't get those calls answered, we know where we start on that quality perspective with meeting that customer's needs. So really, success story here. As we set these goals, we knew there were stretch goals to start with, but we changed a lot of things. We changed hiring, we changed the way we staff, we changed the way really we measure performance, and you're starting to see the results. And really, we're where we want to be, and there's still room for improvement here, but you can see this year, we're up to 89% of those calls being answered on time. So really, this is one of the reasons we do this. It's the reason we track stuff. So, And then the committee ultimately decided to hold on the 80% metric for the upcoming year. Next up, environmental stewardship and sustainability. Obviously, this is a focus for KUB. Obviously, KUB is focused on the environment, and there's three distinct programs here that we're measuring this upcoming year. And one of them is the one we just talked about, which is the weatherization of homes. Obviously, this is through our customers' contribution and rounded up. It's KUB's contribution. It's partnering with TVA and other partners. This year, we strive to weatherize over 250 homes in our community. Next up, community solar. This is something we're very proud of. Obviously, we've talked to this board many times about it. If you live here, drive west on the interstate before you get to 640, you'll see our solar project sitting there on the right-hand side of the road. This year, we had a goal of getting that 70% prescribed or subscribed. Next year, we want to take that all the way to 100%. So we want to have that project completely subscribed by the end of next year. And then finally, it's time to start working on that flexible generation. This is one of the resolutions you passed to allow us to reinvest these savings in these type of projects. We hope to have 20% of our subscriptions for these type of projects placed this year. Now, that's not maybe construction, but that is that we have subscriptions in place for 20% of our flexible generation. Currently, we've got an RFP out working on this type of work. We've asked for people to propose on projects, and currently our environmental staff is working through that. The other piece of this is working with TVA, maybe on some of that generation that we've got through Green Invest to possibly convert that over to flexible power. So this is something that you'll hear more about throughout the year. Okay. All right, lastly, fiber service. Obviously, this is a key focus for the organization this upcoming year. Jamie talked to the board and showed a map very similar to this last month. This is our fiber service territory. What you see here is the green, which represents where we currently are today. We've got that fiber backbone in these areas. Customers are enjoying that service. The gold is where we hope to finish this fiscal year. So we've still got work to do in those areas, but we should have that wrapped up by the end of this year in June. Blue, which is a large portion of the map, is that major push we're making this year to expand fiber to our south and east areas. You can see that we're hoping to put up almost 1,200 miles of new fiber. So as we do that, obviously we're adding customers in those areas, but also backfilling with customers in existing areas. And this upcoming year, we hope to add about 9,250 new fiber customers. So covered a lot. Any questions? All right.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the board today? Nope. Following the adjournment of this meeting, the board will have a lunch session that is open for the public to observe. This meeting is adjourned.